How's everybody doing?
Doing well.
Great. Good to see you guys.
So Justin, I'll start with the obvious. How big was it to get Paul McNeil back for this season?
No, it was big, right? It was a big deal, and we're excited to have him back, and I'm excited to be a part of his continued growth and development. I think as you look at his career, his trajectory is just going up, and I'm excited to be able to work with him and to help him, and as he tries to become who he wants to become as a basketball player, as a young man, and obviously we all know what he does at a high level, right? And what he does it as well as or better than anybody's ever done it here before, right? And so it's just continuing to add to what he does while also moving that part.
How much of the roster building was kind of centered around having a player like Paul or Paul in it for this upcoming season when you were constructing the roster, not knowing his decision?
Yeah, as I looked at building a roster, myself and staff, we put a priority on shooting, right? As you can see, and I think we did a good job addressing that, across the board. And so Paul fits into that perfectly, and so it ended up working out pretty good when we think about what our goal was when we got into it, and then how we finished up at that. So, obviously his size and positional size is really attractive as well. He can play multiple guard positions, and so that made him, valuable. And we were looking at just across the board, just having good size and having shooting. So Paul fit in nicely.
Tucker Senate, NC State on his side. When you guys were putting the staff together, was there a focus or a trait that you were trying to identify with each of those guys in terms of your assistants?
Yeah, there was three things I was looking for. First, I was looking for guys of high character, guys that I could trust when they were out on the road representing NC State, right? Guys that I'd be comfortable with going into parents' homes and them being able to communicate and be role model for these guys. I was looking for experience, guys that have done it before, right? That have been at this level and that have been in those big games and know what it feels like, been in those big recruiting battles and know what it feels like and know what it feels like to get it done, right? And then the last thing was winning. I wanted guys that have been a part of winning, and because it's hard, right? To win is really, really hard. And a lot of people think that just winning a game happens the day of the game or during that game. But so much goes into it beforehand. And, guys that have won, they know what it feels like. They know what it smells like, know what it sounds like in the gym every single day. And, so those were the three characteristics I was looking at when I put this staff together. And I feel really good about the group and being able to pull those characteristics out.
JC Zumbo, the Wolfpacker, along those lines, is it interesting that you were able to coach against two of them in the SEC? And then what also went into the thinking of retaining Patrick Stacey in his role?
Yeah, what's up, Jay? How you doing? With Coach Goins, he's from Greensboro. We've got a lot of mutual people in common, and as I thought about like what I want my staff to look like and from an offensive standpoint, I kind of started thinking about, okay, who were some of the tougher teams to guard that I'd played against, and Georgia was one of those teams. I liked how they played. I liked the spacing. I liked the pace they played at. So there was a lot of things that I liked about it, and I'd always kind of put in the back of my head, like, when I become a head coach, offensively, from a philosophical standpoint, I wanted to kind of look like that. And he and I started to build throughout the seasons and talk and kind of share ideas. And then when this opportunity happened, I didn't know if I'd be able to get him or not, but he was a guy I wanted to talk to, and we had a few conversations, and it went well. And obviously, he came over, and so excited to have him. And then with Coach Brooks, man, he's a vet. Like everybody you talk to, you know, they have nothing but praise for him. And so I've been in some recruiting battles with him, and you know, he has a way about him of developing those deep relationships with kids and their families that has made him an elite at recruiting. He's also a great defensive mind, and coming from Baylor, where you know they did a few different things, but in particular, the zone that they ran was really effective during that championship run, and that's something that you know we want to look to you know implement into what we do. And so having familiarity with both of those guys in the league, not only like what they were doing there, but just kind of got to watch them, you know, in warm-ups, watch them, you know, as they walk through the halls and you know have conversations with them. And both of those guys were guys that I was, you know, really impressed with, and kind of tucked away in the back of my mind of like guys I'd love to work with.
Patrick Stacy.
Yeah, Patrick, man, he's I didn't know Patrick at all. He had worked with Amaro Morgan, who was on my staff at Tennessee, and he raved about him, right? But I didn't know him. But when I got here, you know, April 1st was the press conference. Portal opens on the 7th. It was myself, Riley Collins, who was my player development guy I brought with me from Tennessee, and Patrick was here. And it was like, okay, we got to get to work. And so I was impressed with how hard he worked, how prepared he was, you know, to be able to shift gears and understood my vision as we kind of entered the portal. And so, you know, we spent a lot of late nights together, a lot of late night phone calls, and he made himself always available. And so through that process, you know, he was very impressive, and it was, you know, I started to warm up more to the idea of him being on our staff. And, you know, as I started bringing other guys in and other assistants in, and they were able to spend time with them, they kind of validated what I was seeing and what I was feeling. And so it made that decision really easy, to be honest, because I mean, he is, I think he's a rising star in this business. I really do.
Jonas spoke with Carolina Blitz. You mentioned a press conference on April 1st. Once all the cameras shut off, once all the media went away, it was just you coming back home. What's the first thing you kind of did to kind of take it all in? To kind of realize you were back here at NC State.
Man, I don't know. So much happened that day. You know, it was like it was a whirlwind. You know, I had my whole family from all over. They came. They were here. All the former players that were there. Man, some of them I hadn't seen in a while. It was so good to see them and be able to spend some time with them. You know, but after all of that happened, and you know, we got to the hotel, and it was just my wife and I and my little guy had finally went to bed. You know, it was just something where we just kind of sat there and, you know, just kind of reflected on the entire journey that you know we had been through. You know, and I'm sure, I mean, all coaches have that journey, but I told her I wouldn't be here without her. You know, because of her willingness to be by my side, her willingness to just pick up and move. I mean, I went from, Elon to App State to Marquette in the Midwest to Santa Clara in California to Arizona, back to Marquette, Tennessee. Right? I mean, we bounced around, and like my oldest son went to 3 different high schools. You know, and never once did she say, "Nah, we're not moving." You know, no, we can't do it. She was always had my back, and that was the kind of exhale moment. That was kind of the, man, everything, the dust is settled. I gotta thank her, because without her, I wouldn't. It wouldn't happen.
Lou Pascucci, Pack Pride. Can you talk about analytics a little bit? You know, you played during a time when analytics wasn't as accessible, like the level of deep stats that you get today. How does that fit into your program, and you know, have you kind of been with coaches that have taken that more seriously and ones that haven't, and what do you plan to do with that?
Yeah, no, you know, when I played, it's funny, man, looking back on it, you had the 3-point line that was at the top of the key. I can still remember my coach yelling, like, you know, if you're going to shoot a three, your foot has to be like right on the line. You're running flex offense, you know, 8 guys inside the three. And, you know, the mid-range shot was, you know, it was something everybody tried to get to, or they did, right? And so as a former player of that era, it takes time to kind of adjust to the whole analytics parts of it, and the understanding of, you know, the mid-range may be not a great shot, right? And, you know, I got a game winner off of mid-range, you know, against Maryland here in the arena. I stopped at the free throw line and made one, right? And so it's hard to tell me, hey, the mid-range is a bad shot. But, you know, those guys, they hit me with enough numbers, and I've been hit with enough numbers through the years to kind of be able to implement analytics into my processes, both offensively and defensively. And so, you know, through the last few years, I'd say I've become even more aware of them, and, you know, studied it more. And just being like on the defensive side of the ball in the SEC, there's a lot of teams that play off of analytics, right? So you got to be prepared to stop them, and hey, what makes that good? What makes it, you know, not good, right? And so, but I plan on, you know, implementing analytical, you know, views, concepts into everything we do, right? It's everywhere, right? From analytics to AI, like all of that stuff is in there. And you got to figure out ways to make you more efficient, right? Because that's the end goal of it all, is to become as efficient as you possibly can. So, yep, we will do it. And I got a great staff of guys that understand it way better than I do, and are even better at explaining it to me and allowing us to implement it into our, you know, our philosophies.
Hey, Justin, Ty Gibson, CBS 17. What will your team look like on the floor? Fast-paced, defensive-minded. What will your team resemble?
Yeah, I got a vision of what I wanted to look like, but you know, what I'll say is we'll play top personnel, you know, and as you know, in this era, man, you're bringing all these guys in, and you think you know what they're going to look like, how they're going to be, how they're going to play, right? But you never really know until you get them, right? And so I want to be clear, like, we're going to play to our personnel, and you know, and we'll get a better feel for guys' tendencies and strengths and weaknesses to a greater detail. Like I think we know now with all the analytics and all the film we studied, but you know, as we get the group together, we'll get to see how that meshes together. But philosophically, I want to play fast. I want to play with pace. I want to space the floor. You know, all of those things. Defensively, I want to be aggressive. I want to, you know, impose our will. Now, don't sit back and wait to be attacked. We'll mix up different defenses. You know, primarily a man-to-man, but we'll play a little zone. We'll get into some pressure. We'll get into some zone pressure, just to, you know, give different looks. But you know, a lot of that will be determined on, you know, how quick the guys can pick things up, and you know, how well everything meshes together.
Referee Lander, Hoops HQ. Going back to Paul, beyond what he brings on the court, how big a statement was it for a guy of his stature to stick with the program, to stick with you? And,
Yeah.
and have you seen any kind of residual effect of guys, other recruits and other people responding to that?
Yeah, I think I think, you know, as you know, my vision for the program of really taking care of the state, right? Recruiting North Carolina really hard, and trying to keep the best players in North Carolina home. For that reason, right, added with, you know, the things he had done on the court, made it a big deal. You know, I don't know if you could say there's a better shooter in the state of North Carolina than Paul McNeil is right now, right? And so you add that with, he's one of ours. Like, he is NC State. He's an NC State guy, right? And so that made it even more important to keep one of ours home. And so you combine those two things with, you know, my familiarity with him. Like, I was the first coach to offer him back in the 10th grade when I was at Tennessee. you know, and I remember being in those back gyms, in one of those Adidas events, watching him play and believing in him then, you know, and I followed him all the way through, even in college. So I feel like I got a really good understanding on who he is as a player and as a person. I understand where he's come from, you know, whereas the freshman year might not have been as smooth, right? And then sophomore year probably exceeded expectations, right? And so now it's like junior year, okay, and here's what you have to expect, right? And so for those reasons, yeah, it was huge to keep him home. And so I think we'll get a better feel as we continue to go out on the road and recruit, bring guys to campus on the residual effect of it. But I do know different people in the grassroots community have been excited about it, have been you know, calling and just excited that, you know, we were able to keep.
Chris Lee from WRL, how you doing?
Okay.
Couple quick ones for you. As you're getting reconnected with Raleigh, how's it been like showing recruits around, trying to sell them on Raleigh while you're getting reconnected with the city and seeing the growth itself within the last month?
It's been cool. That's been one of the coolest things, is riding around campus on the golf cart with Zupko, Chris Zupko, who kind of directs those guided tours. It's been cool for me to see the growth of campus. Like Harrelson Hall is no longer there, you know. The Brickyard isn't what the Brickyard used to be. You know, I tell all the recruits, man, I remember just hanging out on this Brickyard right here. We didn't have cell phones, and this was the meet-up place, and you go to Chick-fil-A, and you may be late to class at Harrelson, where you had to walk around the deal like 100 times to get there. To see Hillsborough Street, what it's kind of become, and I remember it used to be the Big Bad Wolf used to be on Hillsborough Street. I don't even know if that place is still there. We went there after we beat Wake that my freshman year. But yeah, just to kind of see how it's evolved, and it's awesome. It's just continued to grow. Raleigh itself, you know, just continued to grow. You know, when you look at downtown and everything, and so there's still some special places that I'm able to hit. Go over to Clues, go get a hot dog, and kind of hang out over there. Emilio's has kind of turned into my spot as I'm back. But it is cool to walk the recruits through memory lane a little bit, and also to see where it's gone, you know, and to share my stories about Reynolds, right? I mean, they did an unbelievable job renovating Reynolds, but also being able to tell them, man, this thing used to hold like 14,000, and it was the hardest place to play in the ACC, you know, and so all of that stuff is cool, all of it's great, but I think, you know, as you look at campus, man, it's under Chancellor Howell's direction, it is like exploding right now. It's an unbelievable time to be here at Raleigh and to be at NC State. Like it's an unbelievable time.
And you've been able to find some diamonds in the rough before out of recruits. When you're looking at guys who are coming from a mid-major level, what traits do you notice that lets you know that they will translate to a Power 4 level?
Yeah, and first, I you know, my staff is, you know, has been great with helping to identify those guys and identifying those guys. And there's some other people we lean on outside of our program, right, that gives us perspective and views on those guys. And so, you know, so like the obvious, being able to shoot the basketball was a priority in those guys that we looked at this year. But toughness, like guys that are tough, was something that we put a premium on. Guys that have won. Like if you look at the guys that we brought into the program, they're coming from winning situations or have been in some winning situations, and they have a lot of winning qualities, right? Because those guys are the ones where you bring in, and now they know what it feels like to have to mesh, to sacrifice a little bit because you got another player beside you, but everybody's main goal is based on winning.
Hey, Coach, Charlie Dribble, 24/7 Sports. You mentioned shooting, and you mentioned, you know, toughness as guys that you were looking for in the portal, but you also brought in a lot of guys that had multiple years of eligibility remaining, you know, on their clock, and your willingness and desire to start a program. How important do you think that is, considering how this program has gone in the past year and what's going on with that?
Yeah, it's big. You know, like You know, I've been clear in my communication of I want to build a program. I'm not just trying to build a team every year. I'm trying to build a program of people that feel the same way about NC State that I do, right? And I think to get to that, you're going to need some guys that have the opportunity to be here for multiple years, right? As with the portal and everything, nothing's guaranteed. But I firmly believe, like, if you're here in this program, you get to run out in front of 19,700 at the Lenovo Center. You walk around town and everybody has that and knows who you are, and you feel the pride of being at NC State, that you'll want to be here. You know, you'll want to be here. And so we were intentional about guys for multiple years, and you know, being able to hopefully fight to retain them that next year. But you know, the most important thing was that they all fit. And so you know, with as I look at those 5 guys, 6 guys that have multiple years left, it you know, it fits well with the idea of, you know, trying to starting off building that program.
Hey Coach, Trayvon Miles from ABC 11. A couple weeks ago, or maybe a couple days ago, some posts went viral involving you and some guys you've never coached before, like Jordan Snell and Trey Holloman graduating. Why did you feel it's so important to be there and for them to be visible as the leader of this program, to show them that you're still around?
Yeah, because they're NC State, they're Wolfpack, right? They are they put on the uniform, they've worn the uniform, and regardless of how long it was or who was the coach, it doesn't matter, right? We're all the same because we come from NC State, right? And so, and both of those young men I've talked to, you know, multiple times. You know, Trey and I had some really deep conversations, right? Because you know, he was, you know, just kind of staying on task, right? Keeping him to stay on task. And we sat down one day and just I explained to him the importance of getting that degree. You know, like, it might not feel like it's something that is important right now, but you will look back in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, and you'll say, man, I wish I would have. Man, can I come back and get it? I said, why do that, right? Go ahead and knock it out right now, get it done. And I was proud of him that he got it done. I was proud that he tried to make it to both graduations, his college's graduation, then made it over to the student athlete late with his mom and his stepdad. But and then Snell, just, you know, he's a great young man, and you know, ever since I've gotten the job, he's always kind of just been around, hanging in the offices. And I know his dad had recruited me way back when, and so just kind of knowing what he's made of, what he's built of, and getting to know him in this short time. I mean, I felt like as the leader of this program, I owed it to those guys to be there, and it's something that both of us will remember for the rest of our lives and have pictures to show of it.
Jaden Watson-Fisher, News and Observer. Going back to Paul again, I'm sorry, but what can you kind of tell us about the process of, you know, the conversations that y'all had, and maybe what was the confidence level as you guys kind of continued those up until his decision?
Yeah, you know, the conversations, they were, you know, it started out as basketball, right? And as we continued to talk, it went into a lot of different areas, whether it was family and background, whether it was relationships, whether it was trust, you know, legacy, all of those things. I mean, we talked often, and Paul was great through the process. And you know, never once was I ever like frustrated or upset with him. Like, it was his process. Everybody's entitled to their own process, because at the end of the day, he needed to be at peace with the decision, no matter what he did, right? And it couldn't be, man, you know, whatever, coach convinced him or whatever. Like, no, I wanted it to be organic, and you know, made the case why, you know, he should be here. But you know, he talked to a lot of other people, as you know, I mean, he's a good player. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that have interest in him. So, but the conversations, you know, they took a lot of different paths. We went down a lot of different journeys, and you know, and it was good. And I think it'll help me as I get to coach him, because I got to learn a lot of in-depth things about Paul.
Also, I know you helped develop Dalton Connect from a solid mid-major player to an NBA draft pick. How much of that experience are you able to maybe draw on when you're recruiting some of these other guys?
Yeah, and to go back to the Paul thing, like when I said I got to learn a lot of in-depth things about him, he got to know a lot of in-depth things about me too, you know, and we both shared. It wasn't just a one-way deal. You know, he got to know about my family and their journey and my why and where I came from and all of that stuff. And so we both shared and we both, you know, I think formed a bond and formed a relationship that will, I think, help us both as we you know, embark on what we're walking into. But with Dalton, yeah, I mean, Dalton was an amazing guy. You know, he was coming from the worst defensive team in the country, King Palm rated, and he was going into a team that the season before we were like the third best defensive team in the country, right? And it's like, you know, complete opposites. But you asked him why, and he said, I knew I needed to get better on that side of the ball to do what I needed to do. He felt like he could score on anybody, but he had to prove that he could guard for him to improve his draft status. And so that alone caught the eyes of the next level, the NBA. And he was never an elite defender, but that commitment that he showed, that willingness every day to try to be better there, it caught their eye, and I think left a little less doubt in them that, man, we might be able to get him to an adequate defender, right? And so as and I'd say the same with Chaz Lanier, right? Chaz Lanier the next year, he came in and again, he was, you know, could score the ball, you know, just as well as, well, maybe not just as well, but he could score the ball similar to Dalton, more of a shooter, but his defensive prowess was kind of at question as well. And so that's why he chose to come there, to prove that, hey, I can guard, I'm a complete player. So as we look at, you know, moving forward, and the guys that, you know, that will be here, that I'll have that I'll coach, I will be able to share that story of, look, you know, it's great that, you know, you can score. I don't know if you'll be able to score as good as those two guys. If you do, man, we're gonna win a lot of games. And but they also understood and valued the defensive side. And to get to where you want to go, to get to where these guys want to go, man, it's going to be hard to just score your way there. You got to be able to do a little bit of everything. And here's Live and Prove, two guys that come from the mid-major, and one wins the Julius Erving Award for best wing, the other wins the I think it's the Jerry West Award for the best shooting guard. But both guys chose a school because they wanted to improve their defensive, you know, their defensive side of the ball.
Coach Brian Murphy with WRL, good to see you again. This kind of ties into a lot of the questions, but RJ Keene, I know analytics had as a guy who was, you know, maybe the best player in the country who doesn't score. How do you find a guy like that? Do you really rely on Patrick and some of his analytics? And then how do you project what he can do in your system or on a team like yours?
Yeah, no, Patrick Stacey brought him to my attention, you know, and it was one of those long nights we were in here working and trying to just put together a roster that fit, right? I didn't want to just go out and grab a whole bunch of, oh man, this is the best player out there, right? I wanted pieces that really complemented each other and that really fit. And, you know, I was telling them what I was looking for, and I was like, man, we need a glue guy. We need a guy that's willing to do anything to win, right? And he said, I got the guy for you. And so he'd been telling me about him for a couple of days, and I just like, okay, we'll get to it. Let's try to get, you know, this starting five set, right? And he kept coming back to him. And then one night, late night, he wore me down. That's all right. I'll watch him, right? So he puts him on the film in the offensive side, and I'm watching. I'm like, oh, okay, he's there. Well, let me show you what he really does. And then he goes to the defensive clips, and I'm like, holy cow, like this dude is like, this is what I'm talking about. So then I said, can you get me on the phone with him? So he called him right then. I don't know what time. He was on the West Coast though, and it was late our time, and we called him. And I just remember that conversation. He said, Coach, if I come to NC State, man, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I'll run through a wall. I'll get every loose ball. I just want to win. And right then I said, man, that's music to my ears. Like, when can you get here? You know, and that was pretty much it. That was pretty much it. And you know, we continued to talk from there. But you know, congrats to shout out to Patrick Stacy, man. He heard me. He heard what I was saying I wanted, and he had a guy that, you know, that I'm really excited about. That is all about winning, like all about it.
Hey Justin, Aaron Beard with the Associated Press. I have a kind of a big picture question for you. With all the chaos in college sports of several years of NIL, or a couple years into revenue sharing, portal, all of the above, right? I'm curious, what are your biggest takeaways of trying to build a foundation of your first program, you know, and get started amid all this? What is the biggest challenge of just trying to get your hands around everything? I know you've experienced it as an assistant, but being the guy in charge and trying to build a program up with this backdrop.
Yeah, it's you know, I don't know, I got a different view on it, because I think, you know, a lot of people still look at the money, and they look at how much money these young men are making, and you know, maybe lose the sight of like, oh, it is transitional to an extent, but it still comes down to relationships. It still comes down to being able to develop a relationship with these young men in the recruiting process. You know, that's a huge part of landing them, you know, because the money is the same across the board, right? I mean, if I'm offering 100, another guy may be offering, you know, 110, right? But it's all in the ballpark. But what makes him choose that particular school? Most of the times it's going to be that relation, and so that relationship. And so we are trying to be as you know, as relationship based as we possibly can in it. And you know, when the numbers get involved, that's when the GM and the agent kind of, you know, they'll do what they do to make sure we find that landing spot. But I think you gotta have that relationship in recruiting, develop it there, and then once you get them, gotta continue to fight for that relationship, because the other part is now you're coaching a guy that's making more money than you, or making more money than your staff, right? And so you gotta have the relationship to be able to coach them hard, and they understand why you're coaching them hard, and you've had those conversations, you know, beforehand of like, hey, this is what it's gonna look like, you know, and it's not gonna be ice cream and rainbows every single day, right? There may be some of those days, but you know, you gotta trust me. You gotta. I don't want you to be surprised, right? And this has nothing to do because you're getting paid either. It's because you told me you wanted to play in the NBA, you know. And so, while the money is a thing, I'm not going to sit up here and be naive enough to say, you know, money isn't involved. But I still think sometimes the relationship piece is missing in people's view of you know, these young men.
Samuel Locklear with Inside Pack Sports. I just wanted to ask about your opinion on the 76 tournament, 76 team tournament expansion, going from 68 to 76.
You know, I come from a space, man, where one is playing an NCAA tournament is like a special thing. It's unbelievable. And yeah, as a player, I never got the chance to play it. You know, like, you know, back then the ACC was, I mean, it was what, 9 teams, and you played everybody twice, and it was, you know, 7 of the 9 were top 25 teams, right? It was like dog fight every night. It would have been a quad 1 game every night you played, you know what I mean, back then. And you know, we had some roller coaster years. We had one year, man, we were like 18th in the country, and then lost like 6 or 7 in a row down the stretch, didn't make it, you know. made it to the championship of the NIT one year, right? But as I walked away from my college experience, and I would always share with my guys that I would coach, I never played an NCAA tournament. And I tell them, man, you don't know how hard it is to do that, right? To make it. And so when I first made it as a coach, it was just amazing, right? You know, I was taking pictures all over the place. I'm stealing the stuff off the walls. You know, I got all that stuff because I never made it as a player. And then after that game, because we lost my first time I went, second time, we lost to Michigan, I think, in the second round. And, you know, I just kind of addressed the team and just, you know, share my experience with it. And like, man, you guys, you know, it wasn't a failed year. Like, we made the tournament. Like, this was special. So as we look at where it's going now, I like it, right? I think the more people that get to experience it, the better. And because it is something that you'll remember for the rest of your life, that you made it or you didn't make it. And I think it's such a special event, and it's the greatest event, sporting event on TV, you know, and so I think the more athletes that can take a part of it, the more teams and other programs and coaches can be a part of it, I think it's special.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.